Bamidele's hands trembled as he stared at his phone. The message on the screen blurred before his eyes. Tulani is dead. She collapsed at work and never woke up. He dropped the phone on the bed, his breath coming in short, uneven gasps. Tulani. Dead? It couldn't be true. Just a week ago she had been vibrant, laughing at his jokes as they shared drinks at the lounge. He could still hear her voice teasing him. Bamidele, you're too serious. Smile more. But she had complained about headaches later that week. He had brushed it off. Now she was gone. Bola stood in the doorway, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She could see Bamidele's panic, the sweat forming on his brow. She knew the truth. Baba Ogunbi's words echoed in her mind. The women he touches will die. That is the price. Are you okay? She asked, her voice cautious. Bamidele didn't look at her. It's Tulani. She's gone. Just like that. Bola's stomach churned. She had to keep calm. I'm sorry, maybe it was an illness. She was fine. How does someone just die? He snapped, running his hands over his head. Bola bit her lip, her heart pounding with the weight of the secret she carried. This is my doing, she thought, the guilt twisting in her stomach. She turned away from Bamidele, unable to meet his eyes, knowing this was just the beginning of the storm she had unleashed. A few years ago, Bamidele and Bola lived in a small dusty street in Aragon, a place where dreams often withered under the weight of poverty. They stayed in a cramped, run-down apartment with cracked walls and a leaking roof that dripped whenever it rained. Bamidele worked as a labourer, spending his days hauling heavy bricks at construction sites under the blazing sun. Bola sold provisions at the city's bustling market, competing with other vendors for customers. Yet, no matter how hard they tried, their income always fell short. One evening, Bamidele returned home, his clothes drenched with sweat and dust, his face lined with exhaustion. Bola was stirring a pot of watery beans over the stove when he dropped heavily onto the worn-out sofa. Bamidele, we need to talk, Bola began, keeping her eyes on the pot. He rubbed his forehead. What now, Bola? Is the landlord complaining again? No, she said, her voice trembling. It's us. This life, it's killing us. You work so hard, but what do we have to show for it? Bamidele's face darkened. You think I don't know that? You think I enjoy watching you struggle? Tears welled up in Bola's eyes. I just wish something would change. Bamidele sighed and reached for her hand. It will, Bola. One day we'll leave this place. But as Bola stared at the cracked ceiling that night, her heart ached with doubt. His words felt like a dream too far away to reach. One afternoon, as the midday sun blazed fiercely over Aragon, casting shimmering heat waves across the dusty streets, Bola sat in her small provision shop, fanning herself lazily as customers trickled by. Business was slow, and she was beginning to wonder if the day would ever end. Suddenly, an expensive black SUV pulled up near her shop, sputtering loudly before coming to a halt. A well-dressed woman stepped out, her wrapper flowing elegantly, but her face was tight with frustration. She tried making a call, her phone pressed against her ear, but she seemed annoyed as it went unanswered. Bola stepped forward. Madam, is there a problem? The woman sighed heavily. Yes, my car just broke down and my mechanic isn't answering his phone. It's so hot out here. Bola gestured toward her shop. Come and sit in the shade, madam. At least you'll be out of the sun. The woman hesitated but then nodded. Bola pulled out a plastic chair and handed her a sachet of cold water. I know a good mechanic nearby. Let me call him for you. You would do that? The woman asked, surprised. Of course, madam, it's no trouble, Bola replied. Minutes later, the mechanic arrived. As he began working on the car, the woman adjusted her scarf and turned to Bola. What's your name? Bola, she answered. I'm a Benny, the woman said, studying her with an unreadable expression. You're very kind. I appreciate this. It's nothing, madam, Bola said modestly. Abeni smiled. Come and see me tomorrow. I want to show you something. I want to reward you for your kind heart. Bola nodded hesitantly, unsure of what the woman meant, but curious about what tomorrow would bring. The next day, Bola held the small piece of paper with address written on it, glancing at it for what felt like the 100th time. She stood at the entrance of a sprawling estate, the kind she'd only seen in movies. Towering gates lined with golden bars stretched endlessly along the high walls. She adjusted her headscarf nervously, her fingers trembling. "Is this even the right place?" she muttered to herself. The directions Abeni had given seemed straightforward, but now that she was here, she doubted herself. After several minutes of walking down the estate's neatly paved roads, stopping to ask a gardener for help, she finally found the house. Bola stared in awe but felt her chest tighten. "What am I doing here?" she thought. "Who are you looking for?" a deep voice barked. Startled, she turned to see a security guard watching her closely. I'm here to see Madame Abeni," Bola stammered, showing the piece of paper with the address. The guard frowned but made a call. Moments later, the gate buzzed open. "She's expecting you." Bola stepped inside, her heart pounding. Everything about the place screamed luxury. Flowers lined the pathways, and expensive cars gleamed in the driveway. She swallowed hard, feeling small and out of place. "I shouldn't be here," she thought. But then Abeni appeared at the door, smiling warmly. "Bola, you made it. Come in." Her voice was soothing, and Bola felt her fear ease slightly as she followed Abeni into the house. But she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her life was about to change forever. Abeni sat gracefully on the plush couch, her movements so smooth they seemed practiced. She gestured for Bola to sit across from her. Bola perched on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You've been kind to me, Bola," Abeni began, her voice soothing. "Most people would have just stayed where they were and ignored me, but you came out of your shop to help. You didn't have to, but you did, and I don't take that lightly." Bola smiled faintly. "It was nothing, madam." "It wasn't nothing," Abeni said firmly, "and I believe in rewarding good deeds. So tell me, Bola, what do you want?" Bola blinked, caught off guard. "What I want?" "Yes," Abeni said, leaning forward slightly. "What is your heart's greatest desire? Name it, and if it's within my power, I'll make it happen." Bola hesitated, her mind racing. She could ask for a new shop, a bigger house, or even just money to settle their debts. But deep down she thought about Bamidele. How hard he worked, how much he deserved success. "I don't need anything for myself," Bola said finally, her voice trembling with emotion. "If you truly want to help, madam, help my husband. He works so hard, but life hasn't been kind to him. Please help him succeed." Abeni's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Your husband, A good wife, I see. Very well, I can help him, but you must understand success doesn't come without a price." "What kind of price?" Bola asked, a chill running down her spine. Abeni stood, her tone suddenly serious. "There's someone I'll introduce you to. He'll explain everything, but remember, Bola, great rewards always require sacrifices." Bola swallowed hard, her mind swirling with fear and curiosity. In the evening the following day, Bola sat nervously in the back seat of Abeni's car as it drove through the quiet outskirts of Aragon. The city's noise had faded into silence, replaced by empty streets lined with tall trees. Bola held her bag tightly, her fingers gripping it as if it might steady her racing heart. "Madame Abeni," Bola said hesitantly, breaking the silence. "Are you sure about this? I mean, can this person really help?" Abeni turned slightly, her face calm and confident. "Bola, I told you, this person has helped many people, including me. If you want your husband to succeed, this is the way." Bola nodded, though the fear in her chest didn't ease. She thought about Bamidele, his hard work, and his unshakable belief that things would someday get better. This is for him, she reminded herself. The car turned onto a dirt road and stopped in front of a small, modest house. The walls were made of bricks, but the roof looked worn out. The veranda was cluttered with clay pots, wooden carvings and bundles of dried herbs. Smoke curled lazily from a pot near the entrance, carrying the faint smell of burning leaves. "Is this it?" Bola asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is it," Abeni said, stepping out of the car. "Come." Bola followed hesitantly. Inside, the room was dimly lit. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of powders, dried roots, and small carved figures. In the center sat a man on a wooden chair. His white robe reflected the flickering light, and his piercing eyes seemed to see right through her. "You've brought her," Baba Ogunbiyi said, his deep voice steady and calm. "Yes, Baba," Abeni replied. "She seeks your help." Baba Ogunbiyi turned his gaze to Bola. "What do you want, young woman?" Bola shifted nervously, her hands trembling. I want my husband to succeed, Baba. He works so hard, but life has been so unfair to him. Please, help him." Baba Ogunbiyi nodded slowly, stroking his grey beard. "There is a way, but it requires a sacrifice." Bola's heart raced. "What kind of sacrifice?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Baba Ogunbiyi's eyes held hers as he spoke. "Your husband's manhood will become a vessel for wealth. It will still function as normal, but it will no longer work with you, his wife." Bola froze, the words sinking in. Will it hurt him?" she asked. "No," Baba Ogunbiyi replied. "He will feel no pain, and he won't even know. But you must choose wisely. Once this is done, it cannot be undone." Bola's mind raced. This was her chance to give Bamidele the success he deserved. She thought of his tired eyes, his calloused hands, and the dreams they shared. The price was steep, but she was willing to pay it. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice trembling but firm. Baba Ogunbiyi gave a small, knowing smile. "Very well. Let us begin." The weeks after the ritual felt like a whirlwind to Bola. At first, nothing seemed to change, and she began to wonder if Baba Ogunbiyi's promises were just empty words. But then, everything shifted. Bamidele came home one evening, his face lit with excitement. "Bola, you won't believe it," he said, practically bursting through the door. "The company I worked for just gave me a promotion. They want me to supervise an entire building project." Bola's heart skipped. "Bamidele, that's amazing. I knew things would get better for us." "It's not just that," Bamidele continued, pacing the room. "One of the contractors offered me a side deal. If I manage his materials supply, he'll pay me double my salary." Bola forced a smile, her stomach twisting. She remembered Baba Ogunbiyi's words. This is just the beginning. In the following weeks, Bamidele's fortune only grew. The side deal expanded into more contracts, and soon money began pouring in. He bought new clothes, upgraded their furniture, and even talked about moving to a bigger house. "Bamidele, are you sure all of this is real?" Bola asked one evening, watching him count a stack of money in their modest living room. "Of course it is," he said with a laugh. "You worry too much. I've worked hard for this." Bola nodded, but guilt gnawed at her. She couldn't tell him what she had done, but as she watched his joy, she reminded herself it was for him, for them. Then one night, as they lay in bed, Bamidele touched her shoulder. "Bola," he said softly, his voice hesitant. "Something's wrong." "What is it?" she asked, her heart racing. "I don't know," he replied, frowning. I can't seem to... with you." Bola felt her chest tighten. She reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Maybe you're just tired," she said quickly. "You've been working so hard." "Maybe," Bamidele said, but the doubt in his eyes was clear. Bola turned away, her own guilt too heavy to bear. This was the price she had paid, and it was only the beginning. Bamidele's success only grew with time, but with it came changes Bola hadn't expected. He started staying out late, meeting new people, and attracting the attention of many women. At first, Bola tried to ignore it, but then the whispers started. The first woman was a bright, confident businesswoman named Marayo. She had met Bamidele at a client dinner, and their connection quickly deepened. Bola noticed the changes in Bamidele during that time, his sudden secrecy, his avoidance of her questions. But she said nothing, hoping it was just a phase. 3 weeks after Bamidele became intimate with Marayo, he heard the news. Marayo had been found unconscious in her office, and she passed away the next day. Then came Funke, a bubbly real estate agent who had crossed paths with Bamidele during a property deal. Like Marayo, Funke grew close to Bamidele in a matter of days. Few weeks later, Funke was gone too, collapsing in her home with no explanation. Bola heard about these affairs and the women's death. Unable to bear the guilt and confusion, Bola returned to Baba Ogunbi's modest home. The air felt heavier this time as she entered the herbalist's dimly lit room. "Baba, I need answers," Bola said, her voice trembling. "2 women my husband was with. They both died. What's happening?" Baba Ogunbi looked at her calmly, his piercing eyes unreadable. "It is as I told you," he said. "His manhood is the vessel of his wealth. Any woman he lies with will have her destined wealth transferred to him." Bola's hands flew to her mouth. "And the deaths? Why are they dying?" Baba's expression darkened. "That is the price of the ritual. Their lives must end after 21 days. You chose this path, Bola. It cannot be undone." Tears welled up in Bola's eyes as the weight of her decision came crashing down. "But I didn't know this would happen," she whispered. "Sacrifices are never small, woman," Baba said firmly. "You must live with what you have started." As Bola left the house, her heart ached with guilt and fear. She had wanted to give Bamidele a better life, but at what cost? The deaths haunted her, and deep down, she knew this was far from over. Bola was cooking in the kitchen on a bright Friday afternoon when her phone rang. Wiping her hands on a piece of cloth, she picked it up. The cheerful voice on the other end made her heart leap with joy. "Sister Bola, it's me, Sade." "Sad, my sister, how are you?" Bola exclaimed, unable to hide her excitement. "I'm fine, sister," Sade replied with a laugh. "I'm in Aragon for the weekend. I came for my friend's wedding and I couldn't leave without seeing you." "You're in town?" Bola clapped her hands in delight. "You must come to the house. Bamidele and I will love to have you." "I'll come tomorrow," Sade said warmly. "I've missed you so much, sister." "And I've missed you too. I'll cook your favourite dishes," Bola promised. "Make sure you don't change your mind." "Never, sister," Sade replied. "See you tomorrow." As Bola hung up, her face glowed with happiness. It had been years since she last saw Sade. Her younger sister had moved to Lagos before Bola met Bamidele, and the two had never crossed paths. Now, they would finally meet, and Bola couldn't wait to let them finally meet each other. What Bola didn't know was that fate had already played a cruel hand. Few days before, Sade had gone to a popular restaurant with some friends after running errands for the wedding. At a nearby table sat Bamidele, enjoying a business lunch with a client. Their eyes met when Sade laughed at something her friend said. Bamidele, struck by her beauty, couldn't look away. After the lunch ended, Bamidele approached her table. "Hello," he said smoothly, flashing a charming smile. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the room." Sade smiled politely. "Oh, thank you." "I'm Bamidele," he continued, extending his hand. "Are you new in town?" "I'm just here for a friend's wedding," Sade replied. "But it's nice to meet you." They exchanged numbers, and by the next evening, their casual chats had turned into deeper conversations. Bamidele's charm and attentiveness drew Sade in, and it wasn't long before they arranged to meet again. The connection between them quickly grew, and before they knew it, they had crossed a line neither could take back. The next day, Bola was a whirlwind of activity. She cleaned every corner of the house, cooked Sade's favourite dishes, fried plantains, jollof rice and peppered chicken, and hummed happily to herself. She couldn't wait to see her younger sister after so many years apart. By mid-afternoon, the doorbell rang. Bola rushed to the door and flung it open with a bright smile. "Sade, oh my dear sister," she exclaimed, pulling Sade into a tight hug. "Sister Bola." Sade laughed, hugging her back. "I've missed you so much." Come in. Bamidele is home, you can finally meet him." Sade stepped inside, her eyes widening at the beautifully decorated living room. But when she turned toward the doorway, her laughter died in her throat. Bamidele stood there, frozen, his face pale as their eyes met. Time seemed to stop as the truth sank in for both of them. "Sade," Bola said, gesturing toward him. "This is my husband, Bamidele." Bamidele forced a tight smile and stepped forward. "Nice to meet you," he said, his voice strained. Sade's heart pounded. "Nice to meet you too," she whispered, her voice trembling. She turned away quickly, her thoughts spinning. This can't be happening. Bola, oblivious to the tension, led Sade to the guest room. But the air between Bamidele and Sade crackled with guilt and panic, threatening to shatter everything. Sade sat in the guest room, her heart racing as she tried to process what had just happened. The man she had been seeing, the one who had charmed her with his words and confidence, was her sister's husband. Her hands trembled as she covered her face, the weight of the truth crashing down on her. There was a soft knock at the door. She didn't answer, but the door creaked open and Bamidele stepped inside. His face was pale, his voice a frantic whisper. "Sadie, we need to talk." Sade shot him a furious glare. "What is there to talk about, Bamidele? You didn't tell me you were married. You didn't tell me you were my sister's husband." Her voice cracked with anger and pain. "I didn't know," Bamidele said, desperation in his eyes. "When we met, I had no idea you were Bola's sister." Sade laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "And that makes it okay? You've destroyed everything, Bamidele. Do you even realize what you've done?" "Please, keep your voice down," Bamidele pleaded, his voice urgent. "Bola can't find out. It'll ruin her." "It's already ruined," Sade hissed. "How do you expect me to sit across from her at dinner, pretending everything is fine?" "Sade, Bamidele, what are you two doing up there?" Bola's cheerful voice called from downstairs. Sade wiped her tears, straightened her dress and whispered harshly, "This conversation isn't over." As she walked past Bamidele, her chest ached with guilt and betrayal. The secret was like a fire threatening to consume them all. Dinner was a tense affair. Bola beamed as she served Sade's favourite jollof rice and fried plantains, chatting about old memories and Sade's life in Lagos. Sade, however, barely touched her food, her smile forced. She avoided looking at Bamidele, who sat stiffly at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on his plate. "Sade, you're so quiet," Bola said, frowning. "Is something wrong? Don't you like the food?" "No, sister," Sade replied quickly, forcing a smile. "The food is amazing. I'm just a little tired from the trip." Bola nodded, her expression softening. "You've always been so hard-working. I'm glad you're taking a little time to rest." Sade swallowed hard, guilt twisting in her stomach. She glanced briefly at Bamidele, who caught her gaze for a split second before looking away. His hands clenched the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The tension in the house was suffocating, like a heavy cloud hanging over them. Sade moved through the rest of the day like a ghost, avoiding Bamidele at all costs. She spent her time helping Bola in the kitchen, answering her sister's cheerful chatter, with forced smiles and short replies. Bola noticed the quiet shift in her sister, but dismissed it as fatigue from travelling. But that evening, as Bola cleaned the guest room, her eyes fell on something out of place, a scarf on the nightstand. It wasn't hers, but she recognised the faint scent of Bamidele's cologne clinging to it. Her chest tightened as doubt crept into her mind. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. Why would his scent be on Sade's scarf? Later that night, as the house fell into stillness, Bola stirred from her sleep and heard a faint hum of voices drifting from the living room, hushed but sharp. Slowly she pressed her foot down, careful not to make a sound as she crept closer to the source. "I told you, Bamidele," Sade whispered harshly, her voice cracking under the weight of her words. "We have to do something fast. Sister Bola is going to find out. She's not stupid. You think I don't know that?" Bamidele's voice was sharp but low, a mixture of panic and anger. "But she can't find out, Sade. She must never know. Do you hear me? It'll destroy her if she does." Bola's chest tightened, her breath shallow as she gripped the railing. Her heart pounded like thunder, the words cutting through her like shards of glass. What can't I know? Questions swirled in her mind, each one darker than the last. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped into the room. "Tell me what?" she demanded, her voice trembling, but loud enough to cut through their whispers. Both Bamidele and Saad spun around, their faces ashen. Saadi's eyes brimmed with tears, spilling over as her lip quivered. Bamidele opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat, his guilt written all over his face. "Someone better start talking," Bola said, her voice breaking as she pointed an accusing finger at them. "Right now."